This is Sheffield's old town hall and courthouse. It's been here for over 200 years. In Castlegate, at the centre of Sheffield's old town, and it's where, for most of that time, power has resided. It's where the judges and magistrates sat in court, where the town corporation and the police were based, where our modern politics and local government began. It was actually built by the town trust. The corporation, or the council as it now is, didn't exist in 1808. They only moved in about 30 years later. It's been empty for 25 years, but now there is real hope for a new use, as new owners, Astrum, have received planning and listed building consent to convert the building to a series of serviced apartments, some of them quite enormous, a hotel in the cells, and an underground retail and workshop area intriguingly called the Souk. I'm Simon Ogden, the council's lead on regeneration in Castlegate, and thanks to the new owners, Astrum, Mr. F.A. Omo, I'm able to show you around the building officially as part of Heritage Open Days in Sheffield and the Castlegate Festival 2020. My companion for the visit is Martin McAvey, chair of the Castlegate Partnership, and as a young lawyer, someone who actually practiced in the courts here. People think of the building as Victorian. In fact, it was started in Georgian times, in 1808 to be precise. Since then, it's had quite a starring part in Sheffield's history. In its earliest years, it was the focus of several riots, usually over elections. It was the object of a failed armed rebellion by the Chartist Samuel Holbury, who is now commemorated in the Holbury Fountains in the Peace Gardens. And as Sheffield grew rapidly throughout the 19th century, the building was never quite big enough for what it did. Courthouse, town hall, police station, jail. There wasn't even room for the council to meet. They usually met in a hotel. So it was extended several times. In 1865, the police moved over the road to a new police station, and 30 years later, in 1895, the council moved out. So from 1896 to 1995, the lawyers had the building to themselves. Even then, it had to be extended. In 1955, to provide offices, 3 more courts, including a youth court, and that's how it was for the next 40 years, until finally they ran out of space once again, and new courts, the current courts, were opened on West Bar in 1995, and the old town hall has remained deserted ever since. So here we are in one of the fanciest bits of the building. This is the judge's entrance, leads off Waingate, and takes you to this rather fine staircase, the Georgian style, and the staircase would take the judges up to their own private apartments, which we'll see on the first floor. Martin, did you ever come in here as a lawyer?
I did. I spent the formative years of my time in the legal profession coming to this building. So it's a bit like a step back in history today for me.
Yeah.
It really is.
But presumably you never invited to the judges' chambers?
No, well, we certainly didn't enter the building from this direction.
Yeah. So if you were a defendant or a prisoner, this would be your arrival point to the courts. Certainly from the 1890s when this bit was built. And this is an arrangement whereby you've got a covered corridor with gates at either end, and the procedure, as I understand it, would be that the Black Mariah, the black police secure wagon would come in here with its horses, gates would be closed at both ends, and the prisoners would be taken out, and they would be taken into the holding cells over here, and then brought up to the courts via a back staircase that directly takes you into the courts. I don't know how this compares with modern courts.
Well, it's very interesting actually. There's one struck immediately by the way in which it's very confined. Both entrances gated. Very much different to what the modern day courtroom entrance to a courtroom would look like. And it's very interesting looking at the way in which the cells are shaped. The whole thing is very much around security. You're very much confined in a very, very small space.
So let's go look at the cells.
Yes, let's go see.
So here we are in the cells.
The ceiling is lovely, the way
these were built in 1896. They're underneath Court 1. So all the soundest parts of the building actually. So apart from a little bit of damp and peeling paint, structurally they seem pretty robust. The cells at the time were probably fairly state-of-the-art, but they look extremely Spartan to us. Glazed brick on the walls, obviously not easy to graffiti on and easy to clean up. And then if you come inside, you'll see it's a sleeping accommodation, a solid wood bed and a solid wood pillow. The plan for these spaces is for this to become a hotel, and I believe the idea is to knock each 2 cells into one to make a little bit more space. Probably be a relief for any of the prospective guests, but I think the doors will all be kept. Only every other one will be usable. The most famous defendant in these courts was probably Charlie Peace, who was a notorious Victorian burglar, murderer and serial escapist from Sheffield, born just a few streets away from here, but had quite a lengthy life of crime. Eventually was apprehended and brought to trial here, and then eventually taken to Leeds Army Jail and was executed. But rather bizarrely, then took on a second life as a kind of folk hero. And I can remember as a kid reading comic strips about the adventures of Charlie Peace. There was at least one film made about him, and quite a lot of Victorian melodramas. So he kind of lived on as a fantasy character long after his rather short and pleasant life. So we were standing in the main foyer, if you like, of the courts. When the courts were in use up to 1995, this area would be thronging with clients and solicitors and police and all the court officials. There was a snack bar here as well. So this was the kind of heart of the courts, but it is actually part of the original Georgian building as well, although it's been much altered, so it's difficult to see the original shape of the building. Behind me is court number 1, the entrance to court number 1, which was one of the courts added in the mid-Victorian era in the 1860s, above the cells. And also off here you got to all the other courts in the building, including the other 2 Victorian courts, and in the 1950s the modern courts, as they were then, off to my right. I believe that this area stays as a public open space or public space in the building, from which the different apartments are accessed. Martin, you probably remember this bit. This was
I do. I remember coming here as a young solicitor, going into Court 1, representing clients. It's very interesting to come back today and to just almost see that again in ways that I recall it from 35 years ago.
Wow. So let's go into court number 1 and see what that is like today. So here we are in a rather dark court 1. Normally in its prime there would have been light flooding in through the roof here, which was glazed, but because of vandalism the roof has been covered over, and so there's no top light at all. But this is the largest court in the building. It sits on top of the cells, and it was built in 1896. And this will, in the plans that have been approved, will become one of the main rooms of one of the apartments. Most of the panelling, as I understand it, is to be kept, but some of the judges' benches and the benches in the middle of the room would have to be removed, and I think the hope is that they will be relocated in another public part of the building so that people can see the fittings of the courtroom. But this is going to make quite an impressive room for a centrepiece for an apartment. And now we're passing into the 1955 extension, built to the designs of the city architects in mainly brick. It's quite a 1950s design classic. conservative in comparison to other buildings that were being designed by the architects at that time, like Park Hill or Castle Markets. But in its way, quite a classic of a design of that period. Even under the dirt of 65 years, its elegance still shines through. Stone pilasters, wrought iron railings, very much in the style of the Festival of Britain, you could say. Apparently, the architects only designed it for a design life of 20 years, so it's lasted pretty well. It provided 3 new courts, but the rest of it was offices. We can still see what was the law library and a warren of small offices for officials, different canteens and dining rooms, presumably for different grades of staff and to keep people apart like witnesses and so on. Both the small courtrooms remain, although they've been damaged. One with its original fittings and furniture still in place, the other only with the magistrate's bench. These spaces are all much smaller than the Victorian and Georgian courts. They're also proposed to be converted into residential use, and you can see they're a much more domestic scale. Many Sheffielders have been through the rooms of the Old Town Hall over its 200 years of working life, often witnessing drama, triumph, tragedy, emotion, history being made. Judges, lawyers, councillors, aldermen, jurors, witnesses, criminals, police, victims. Perhaps their voices all still echo in these damaged spaces. What I do know is it's a vital part of Sheffield's history and heritage. And the restoration scheme that's now got planning approval, we anxiously await the start of work, hopefully later in 2020.